Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to day 6 of the CCAI Summer School 2023. Today we're going to talk about AI for biodiversity and ecosystems. As a reminder, this event is supported by CIFORM, Mila, Volkswagen, and WorldSphere.ai. I will say just a few words about Climate Change AI. It's a global nonprofit that catalyzes impactful work at the intersection of climate change and machine learning. If you want more information about what we do, you can visit our website climatechange.ai. You can follow us on Twitter at climatechangeai. You can also register to our community platform where you can meet a lot of people interested in this field and have a lot of discussion about that. And you can also follow our newsletter to have some recent information on research articles or job opportunities, for example. So if it's not done yet, please, you can register at our community platform where there is a lecture Q&A channel where you can ask your question. Since you are a lot of participants in the lectures, we won't be able to ask all the questions. So please upvote for your favorite question or the one that you found most relevant to have a higher chance of being asked. For all participants, you will have to follow the CCAI's Code of Conduct. And please, if there is any situations that arise, report it to reporting@climatechange.ai. So the schedule for day 6 today, we will have a talk on AI for wildlife conservation from Professor Devis Tuia. My name is Arthur. I will be your lead TA today, and I will be supported by Amanda. So I will start by briefly introduce our speaker, Professor Devis Tuia. He completed his PhD at University of Lausanne in Switzerland, where he studied kernel methods for hyperspectral satellite data. He worked as a postdoc in University of Valencia, in UC Boulder, and at EPFL. In 2014, he became an assistant professor at University of Zurich. And then in 2017, he moved to Wageningen University in Netherlands, where he was a chair of geoinformation science and remote sensing lab. Since 2020, he's back at EPFL, where he leads the environmental computational science and Earth observation lab. They studied Earth from above with machine learning and computer vision. So we stop sharing my screen, and thank you very much, Devis, for being here today. The floor is yours now.
All right. Hi, Arthur, can you hear me? So good.
Yes.
Great. So let's try to share the screen. Can you please confirm that you can see the screen in full screen mode?
It works well.
Okay, great. So it seems that we have roughly 45 minutes to spend together, all of us. So thank you very much for attending this lecture. It's a pleasure to meet you, everybody. And I hope you will enjoy this little detour on machine learning and AI for animal conservation. So I decided to give a kind of an overview of different things that I think are of interest to make, the step from sensor data to knowledge. And yeah, I sincerely hope that you will enjoy it. And again, a big thanks to the Climate Change AI team to having me with you today. Great. So today we're going to talk about biodiversity crisis. Okay, we're going to talk about something that is already in the making since already several years, and it is taking a turn that is a little bit alarming, at least for those who look closely like all of us, and that is basically the extreme loss and extinction of species, which has been quantified in something in the range of 15 to 37% by 2015 in a previous publication. And the big question is how good this prediction is, and how well are we actually responding to that. I would say for the time being, not so well. So we are in the black slope down, going down to the gray slope. And it's definitely important that more and more people get aware of the situation and put their resources in order to, change this curve, both with monitoring action like those that I will be talking about today, and helping politicians and decision makers to take the right decision. And hopefully we will reduce the rate of this loss of animal population and species. Because, you know, the biodiversity collapse has some very big consequences. You know, I find this picture funny. I'm not saying that it is bigger than climate change, but, you know, all these things are related. When I think about it, I think of everything that a biodiverse ecosystem gives us. It can be, you know, on a way in terms of our daily life. It gives us access to medicines and drugs that can help us, you know, live longer or be healthy. It helps us having healthy food, purifying water, purifying the air. So all these different species and the fact that they thrive and they live together give us access of a lot of services that are important to the survival of the planet and also of us as a human species. Now, the story is that this loss of biodiversity is being observed worldwide. It's not just affecting one region of the world, as you can see here in the map at the top. Here, I hope you can see my mouse. You know, areas in red are where the most of the species are being lost, but you know, there are seldom any region that is actually completely, let's say, green, and also you can see that there is a very alarming correlation between the areas where this loss is the most likely and the areas where the loss is more pronounced. So it's actually something that is happening right now, and it's something that we need to work against altogether. And when I say it altogether, it's also because what we see is that there is a very large number of species that are characterized at least as threatened, and so let's say between vulnerable and extinct in the different scaling of the red list, and also not only there is a more or less 30% of the species that are threatened, but there is also a very large portion of the species that are what we call data deficient. And by data deficient, I mean data for which we do not have enough data to actually know if the species are to be considered at risk or not. And this spans all the different realms. It goes for amphibians, where we have the more of the threats, to birds, and the coral reefs is something I deeply care about. As you can see here on the right, you see a very unhealthy coral reef right now with a lot of coral bleached and slowly dying. So basically, I mean, we are at the Climate Change AI Summer School, so I suppose we are kind of like-minded, but I hope that we all strive for a future that looks like the one on the left, rather than the one that looks like the one on the right. And you will be surprised how close, geographically speaking, these two pictures have been taken. So we really need to work all together to fight against the loss of biodiversity. And these are very different levels. So you can start from the political level to show some willingness to action. And that's, for example, in 2021, the UNEP disclosed this new global biodiversity framework that set a number of goals that the global community wanted to tackle to reduce the impact of the loss of biodiversity. I mean, to reduce the loss of biodiversity itself, not just this impact. And, you know, I just reported a number of those measures, but I think the important thing is that in 2022, at the COP15, 188 countries gathered and agreed to put this into practice. But to put this into practice, of course, there is a lot of need for monitoring strategies that are where basically we come in as data scientists, AI experts, and biodiversity experts. All together, we need to provide this information so that this decision maker can take the right decision. And it doesn't work only at the political level, but it's also on the ground. And the conservation actors are not just up in Brussels or being decision maker. They also are there fighting against poacher, preserving animal population in specific reserves, and in their daily life, they need to be where their animals are, where they move, how dense the populations are, and how they are evolving. And again, here as a data science, we have a lot to bring, I think, because unfortunately, there is a lot of this work that is still being done by hand. And so it's conclusions and actions that are taken with very small data samples. And also, even when there is a lot of data being acquired, for example, by video traps or things like that, processing takes a ton of time. So having AI strategies speeding up this type of processing could be extremely valuable for people on the ground. So having this mise en bouche, this introduction, well, I decided to structure my talk in two parts. So a first one where we talk about this possibility to acquire data with new generation sensors, and then having the observational power to really see biodiversity. And the second part, I will talk about machine learning approaches to conservation. So how we take this data and we basically turn them into relevant information. I hope you like the menu for the day. And then I will now start the first part, unless there are some burning questions that you want to tell me. Otherwise, I will continue.
We don't have any question for the moment.
No, fair, very good. Okay, great. So you can write your questions anytime in the chat, and then Arthur will relay them to me. Good. So let's talk about sensors. So this is basically a very exciting times, because we have arrived in a situation where there are several different ways to observe biodiversity. Some of them are image-based, some of them are sound-based, some of them are on the animals, some of them are remote. And we have all these different type of data that together allow us to have a very much wider span of the capabilities of observing animals and globally the biodiversity. And I got very excited when I entered this world roughly 10 years ago. I was working on drones, so just one of these and not all of them. A little by little I realized how rich this space is. It's not just being expert on one type of technology, but like being able to leverage strength and weaknesses of every one of them. So let's make a little tour of the different type of technologies that are around. I'm not an expert of all of them, but I'm trying to cover all this space so that you have a menu of what's around. So the first one, it's what we call on-animal sensors. So these are sensors that are directly placed on the animal. So the animal is often, tranquilized, and the sensor is placed. It's sometimes a collar, sometimes something below the skin, and so on and so forth. And this has the advantage that we can measure a single animal in all its richness. We can have the movement trajectories, the speed. Sometimes there is a measure of the heart rate, and little by little we can really follow this animal in its daily business. So this is great because we can really observe the animal behavior from the front seat. At the same time, we cannot tag all animals in the world. So it means that we are limited to a limited group of individuals. Sometimes the GPS is a bit shaky, so maybe the trajectory needs to be corrected, and there are battery limits, and so on and so forth. So none of this sensor is perfect. So I'm trying to get to the pros and cons. But when it works, it can allow you to make some wonderful research, like in this paper here by Dekneg and colleagues, where they were simulating poaching attacks on animals. So it was the rangers of the parks, like entering the park close to the animals, and the animals were tagged, and by the data that the tags generated, it was possible to see changes in behavior on the animals. And thanks to the data recorder, they could actually detect if the poachers were there or not. So for example, here you could see that the wildebeest were, so you can see their track here in red, they were like exiting their optimal habitat because they were running away basically, or they were using a very energetic path to run away. So they were running very fast. And thanks to all this data, they could basically train a detector that would tell if there was an intrusion by humans or not in the reserve. So you see, in this case, we have an indirect detector of poachers based on the behavior on the animals themselves and of the sentient animals. A second type of sensor, which is probably the one that is the most used at the moment, and at least from what I'm aware, is the camera traps. So camera traps are very easy to get. They don't cost a lot. And they've been popping all over the world, and there is a lot of data sets around of camera traps data that are being used a lot by AI research in conservation. And they probably put conservation on the map of AI, probably thanks to camera traps that has happened. Because in several national parks, these camera traps have been recording data for years, and we have these mountains of data that are get to be updated and updated every year. And often the parks are years behind the processing of the data they acquire. And I think it's very it's really a chance for AI researchers like us to have access to this type of data and be able to, support all these monitoring actions using this data that is already out there, actually. And, it's not only an opportunity for research, but it's also sometimes a very good opportunity for the beauty of these pictures. As you can see here a couple of very iconic ones. The one on the right is actually an award-winning one, it's incredibly beautiful. But unfortunately, reality is not always like that. So the camera trap data sometimes look a little bit like that. So, we have data with motion blur, day, at night. Sometimes the animal starts interacting with the camera, maybe it will even destroy the camera by this interaction. And another thing that is maybe not optimal is that with the camera trap, you will see only a portion of the territory. You will not see all of it. So you always have to extrapolate out if you are interested by modeling populations, for example. But it's a great tool. It's a great data acquisition tool for observing what we usually cannot observe. And it doesn't have to be images. So there are also audio traps or hydrophones, microphones. And this is the realm of passive acoustic monitoring. It's something that I'm personally less familiar with, to be honest. But it basically records sound. It's a microphone out there, and it's basically used to detect individuals according to their singing. It's used a lot for birds, for example. And I invite you to click the Embarry link here to hear what whales sound like. It's if you're not a diver, that's a unique occasion to hear the singing of the whales. So this is really a field that is really picking up a lot of traction. There is a lot of very exciting research in how to process audio data for discounting from environmental noise and picking up the singing or any type of noise of individuals and count animals, get the species, and so on. Okay, now let's move into something which is very close to my heart, which is remote sensing. And remote sensing is a way to cover a lot more ground, let's say, by having a sensor that moves in space and time. So the drones, it's something that it's used a lot to get very close to the ground. So as you can see here in the picture, these are my colleagues at Kuzikus Natural Reserve in Namibia, and one of our former students, Matthew, in the back of the picture here. In our very first campaign in 2014 in Namibia, when we were trying to monitoring animal populations of ungulates, you can see here some of the footage we've taken with the drone. And drones are great for this because they really allow you to cover several square kilometers in a limited amount of time. They limit risks on the field because it's the drone taking the picture and not you sitting on an helicopter that can be, for example, attacked by poachers. But you cannot fly drones everywhere you want. You often need permits, and this takes time and takes also knowledge of local communities. And I think it's important to take that step as well. You need to fly very often in line of sight, so legislation will not allow you to fly much further away, even though it's technically possible. And drones make noise, and noise can modify animal behavior. So you need to be careful to fly high enough, or to use, or why not develop drones that are less noise prone. And again, like before, Dan Morris has compiled a very nice list of data sets with drone data that you can find here in the link if you want to have a look and maybe start to use your deep learning algorithms to detect animals on drone data. And then the final scale up for me, it's moving into space, basically, and using satellites for detecting animals, which may sound a little bit strange because satellites are very much up, several kilometers up in the sky, and then the resolution they provide is not so high, at least in the data that you can have for free. So we're talking about a 10 to 30 meters type of resolution, which probably will not help us a lot in detecting single animals. But going to the commercial data, so when we start to talk about half a meter imaging, then it starts to become interesting. As you can see here in the image on the bottom right, with a 30 centimeter image of WorldView 4, you can start to see single individuals if it's large animals. And there was recently a paper in Nature actually studying how well you can detect and count animals from space using maxillary imaging. Another famous study is this one, where people were using satellite imaging to detect whales. And whales are definitely large enough to be detected from space. Otherwise, what people have been doing before this very high resolution sensor was using proxies, which means, for example, to detect penguins colonies, we will be looking for droppings of penguins or black masses on the ice in order to detect the colonies. But then the detection of single individuals was clearly not possible. All right, so this was an overview of the different sensors we have in the space of animal conservation. I don't know if there are some questions. I can take a couple here, if there are some.
Yeah, we do have one question.
Good.
So how do we ensure that the remote sensing devices in biodiversity areas do not hamper the natural movement and safety of animals?
That's a great question, actually. I mean, I'll take it for the drones, because for the satellite, the sensor is far enough. I think, so in the experience I have, we have been always flying at a height of roughly 100 meters. So the possibility of collision with an animal was very low, unless there is an accident in the drone. In that case, there is a certain probability of the drone hitting an animal, but still maybe not so big. The story is that, yeah, if willing to fly in a very specific pattern to make a close-up, for example, let's imagine we want to identify this zebra here, and that you can see on the screen, and say that this is zebra GZ267. Yeah, you will have to get very close to see the pattern on the fur. So in that case, there is a risk of harming the animals. There is definitely a risk of modifying the behavior because of the noise, mostly. And these are things that are, at least in my opinion, they need to be accounted for when you design the mission to go in and make the monitoring. So if it is for monitoring of herds and how they move in space and time, you can for sure fly at a height that is sufficient not to disturb the animals. If you need this type of close-ups, I will say work with the rangers. They know where the animals tend to be, and keep a safety distance that needs to be agreed with them. So again, it's probably like, don't be the robotics guy or the AI guy that doesn't talk to the rangers or the biologists on site. Just work with them, and then I think this type of problems can be solved together. It's okay, Arthur. Shall I continue?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So far we have been talking about sensors, and now we have the data. So let's do something with it. And here we have this picture that we had in our NatCom paper, where we had this imagination of all the different things that we might want to extract from let's say a digital twin of a savanna, where we have been having several devices acquiring data. So the devices we were talking about before, and the idea was, what can we do with all of this? And you can see that there is a number of very exciting research avenues that involve artificial intelligence and computer vision. You can imagine, detecting and localizing the animals. So, put in the bounding box below, you can track them. So here the little dots is tracking. You can do posture estimation, so skeletonize them in a way, recognizing individuals. So every zebra gets his own number, let's say, or name. You can imagine a 3D reconstruct the environment. So there are so many things that you can extract from this type of data. And again, as before, I'll try to give you a kind of tour of different things with maybe a little bit of accent in detection and localization, because this is the thing that I've been doing the most. So detecting and localizing animals, it becomes a problem of object detection, or even a problem of semantic segmentation. As you can see here in the figure, this was one of the first studies we did on our Namibian data. And basically, we were at the very beginning of all this exciting journey, and we were trying out stuff. So basically, we were having an image input. There was this image from Africa, using a pre-trained model, ResNet 18, back in the day. and then learning something specific for our problem with the little data we had, and we had to collect actually manually by crowdsourcing. And then we were having a model that was basically telling us, is there an animal or not there? So here, everything that is white is a high probability of having an animal, and everything that it is black is very low probability of having an animal. So I know it sounds very, very simple, very standard, but in the end, when we went on this first campaign in Namibia and also all the following ones, we came back with hard drives full of images that looked like this one. And in the end, the thing that we needed to do was to detect animals. And I know you've been looking at this image for a few seconds already, so I'm pretty sure you have been finding at least 5 animals in the center. So let me help you. If you haven't, they are here. But there is also another problem, is that there is so much more in this image, and I'm not sure how many of these you have seen. Maybe some, yes, because they tend to have a very clear shadow. But when the animals are resting below the trees, like in this region here, they're very, very good at hiding, actually. And if we want to make a good estimation of the size of the population and where they are, we need to be robust of all this type of changing in animal aspect, in animal orientation, in the shade, because the shade will become on the time you've been acquiring the data, and also on the different type of backgrounds. So as you can see here, these are all images taken from the same data campaign. So as you can see, you cannot just say, oh, everything that is brown is dirt and everything that is not brown is an animal, because depending on where you are, you will have trees or not, or it can be muddy, it can be in the middle of a river, and then you name it. So the problem is quite difficult if you think about it, because most of the data you get contain no animal, and when there is an animal, the animal shifts depending on the species, the background shifts, so it can get pretty messy, actually, to learn a detector. So back in the day, we tried a lot of these different strategies to make sure that our animal detector will not overfit a single scene and will generalize well across in this full natural reserve in Namibia, Kuzikus. And we came up with a number of things that were useful for learning efficient animal detection models. So in our case, as I told you, it was a kind of an image classification problem, animal, non-animal on the map. And then, we started by pre-training on ImageNet. And then we had a number of different strategies like class weighting. So animal class, much more important than background class, for example, because we have so little of it. Then we had some curriculum learning, meaning that at the beginning, we were showing to the model only images that contained animals. And only in the second phase, when the loss went down, we started to show to the model a lot of images where actually there were no animals. And these images are the largest part of our data set. In most of the images, there is absolutely nothing to be seen, and so on and so forth. There was a number of such strategies, and when they were used all together, they allowed us to have animal detection modules that will be, recall of 90%, so finding 90% of the animals with a precision that was, at the beginning of 20%, then 40, now it's maybe 70, 80%, and we keep improving by, having better models and training them better. But when we had this animal detection models, we thought, what could we do rather than just publishing a paper and then moving to the next project? We thought that we wanted to make something like more useful for the community at large, knowing that the community was, largely composed of ecologists that maybe didn't have all the programming skills and the machine learning expertise to run these models by themselves. And we ended up creating this software suite called AID, where we were basically having a framework that you can see here in light blue, whoever had some images acquired by drone or by camera traps, they could upload it in AID, it can be run either on your machine or on the cloud. And then there were already a lot of deep learning models already implemented in there, and they will calculate in the cloud or locally, and then come back to you with their prediction and ask you to validate them or invalidate them, and then we'll keep retraining to get better according to your expertise on predictions that the model was not so sure about. And we have now been co-developing this with Microsoft AI for Earth and back in the day. And it's open source, so you can just flash the QR code, and then it's a software suite that you can have to process your own data, or you're very happy to, and we're very happy if you branch it and you help us develop it in even its next level. And with aid, we've been working in several places. For example, here in Western Africa, we've been counting migratory birds together with an ecology team. And, we kind of managed to speed up the process that will take before approximately 3 weeks of looking at drone images into 4.5 hours model training and prediction, and then some manual corrections. So I think that this is the type of speed ups we are talking about. It's, making this type of detection and counting processes doable in useful time for conservation. And of course, aid is not the only framework that is around for this type of question. There is, for example, mega detector. Maybe you have heard of this. This has been developed by Sarah Beery, and it's a model that will detect animal versus humans versus vehicle versus empty images, and then can be used to go through these millions and millions and millions of camera trap images and just keep those that are supposedly containing an animal. Like in this case, we have 15% of all the image acquired by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game that had to be screened by humans to just confirm if it was a wolf or not. So this allowed the department to go from we are 5 years behind to we are on par with our image acquisition. So this is a type of frameworks and programs that are being used more and more in this space of AI for conservation. And it was developed by people willing to take a stand for both communities, so AI and biodiversity together. And I hope that that you are also in this corner of the world, and you want to help us building that or doing that for your the area for which your heart beats, let it be in climate change and agriculture, you name it. But this type of broad spectrum type of software suites are really what's making advancing the protection actions of many people who maybe don't have the means to code and develop this type of software suites. Okay, but I've been talking a lot about detection, and maybe you want to see something different, which I completely understand. So let me show you some other things that we can do with all this digital data. So one thing that is kind of a holy grail for many ecologists is individual identification. And it's a terribly difficult task, because you want to basically tell me, given the pictures, or given two individual tigers, let's say, that one is Paul and the other one is Betty, and usually people do that with DNA profiling, but which is very expensive and slow, because you need to actually take samples on animals. And there has been a lot of research about making identification possible through imaging. Okay, so there are animals which have features that are specific to the individual. Think of the whale shark, for example, their patterns are unique. Think of the zebra, same thing, or the cheetah. So all these different animals basically it's possible to identify single individuals just looking at their patterns. And there is a bunch of research that has been done in this respect. So first, using traditional computer vision, as you can see here at the bottom, like matching flukes patterns or matching the spots of whale sharks. And often these studies have been turned into games to make sure that people participate and get to recognize different whale sharks. And now there are boats running on YouTube and checking the videos and try to identify a single whale shark or on your holiday videos. And people have been very, very creative. And I think it's a very exciting area of research, but it's also, as I say, something that is very difficult, especially because it's highly dynamic. Just think about the fact that animals evolve in time. So, I mean, us as humans, we evolve in time as well. I don't have the same face I had when I was 20, unfortunately. And this is also true for all kinds of animals. In time, they change a lot physiognomically. So if you want to make longitudinal study, you need to be able to discount for this modification that go from childhood to adulthood. And okay, and there is also new individuals that enter reserves. Images are never perfect, as we have seen before in the camera trap examples. But I mean, all in all, research is moving forward, and the recent deep learning approaches are showing that there is something to be gained by using these AI approaches for individual identification. And there is this paper that I like a lot about the identification of chimpanzee. And it was performed in a very, very accurate way by the AI versus identification from humans, from trained humans. It was actually half as accurate and much, much slower. So I think there is something to be learned into this technology meets interesting problems in ecology, and that the AI can give us the speed up we need actually to be able to scale this research in an actually at an ecologically relevant pace. Another type of realm where AI is proving to be more and more exciting is what we call post-estimation. Post-estimation is basically the fact of identifying parts of the body of animals. I mean, people are doing that for humans as well, but there is a lot of movement in this area now, especially from the group here at TPFL, from my colleague Alexander and Mackenzie Mattis, who are developing this Deep Lab Cat software suite, where they're basically, detecting different parts of the body of the animals. In this case, I mean, you can see the mouse here, for example, walking around, and the fact is that the model needs to detect the left paw and the right paw all the time and just keep going like that. And all this is also dependent on some type of deep neural network that, given a number of frames with all these different key points identified on them, can train a model that then, given an image without the key points on it, will predict the probability of the key points to be at a specific point. And also, I invite you to read the Deep Lab Cap paper. It's a very good read, and it's something that is really taking a lot of traction now in the post-estimation community, which can be in the lab or out in the wild. And when I say that it's taking traction, I really meaning now there are model zoos for different types of animals, so that models have been trained to make post-estimation on cows, on dogs, and now there are what they call super animal models, where they have models for families of animals that will share similar properties. And I mean, just have a look. I think it's amazing work and very exciting. Then the next one I wanted to talk about, and probably the last as well, is what I call a reconstruction environment. So we move a little bit away from looking at the animal itself, but sometimes, I mean, pretty often, we're also interested by the interaction between the animal and what surrounds the animal. Because, depending on the environment, we will be in different habitats, there will be different visibility, an animal can hide or not, or be in the shade, and so on and so forth. So if you are interested by behavior, you need to know what the habitat looks like. So how do we reconstruct animal habitats? Again, it's sometimes a matter of choosing the right sensors. And here we go back into remote sensing and photogrammetry. For example, you could use LiDARs, which are laser scanning systems, where you basically shoot beams and record the return time. And this gives you immediately a 3D reconstruction of everything that is around you. Maybe a bit of an expensive system, but there is also a lot of research for doing 3D reconstruction from imaging. So in that case, you move around with a camera, you make sure that the images have a big degree of superposition, and thanks to knowing the position of the camera and all the images and the area they overlap, well, you're able to reconstruct a 3D model, or at least, like in this case, an orthophoto of all the environment. And thanks to this orthophoto, you can then do a 3D models that you can move around, and then you can use for studying things like visibility and so on. This is something we have been active here in the lab in the last 2 years, let's say, and we have been focusing a little bit on coral reefs. And we were trying to reconstructing the environment, the underwater environment in 3D, by using consumer camera data, so GoPros, something something you can buy in your favorite convenience store. And we were at the same time trying to reconstruct the environment in 3D and try to understand what we were observing. So which type of coral, which type of family, if it's trash, it's a human being, and so on and so forth. And this is just a video for the pleasure of the eyes, where you can basically see what's going on when we do these diving campaigns. Here, I think, if I remember well, this one is in Eilat, in Israel, and you have on the top left quadrant the video taken by the GoPro, handheld by one of my lucky grad students. On the right, you have the depth estimation. So everything that is yellow is close to the camera. Everything that is blue is very far. And on the bottom left, you have the semantic segmentation of one of our first semantic segmentation models, where you can see that every color corresponds to a different type of object we were observing: massive coral, branching corals, fishes, the line. And on the bottom right frame here, you can see the 3D model being constructed one frame at a time. So you see that as long as we continue diving, so we're doing hundreds of meters in a single dive, we get in video time the 3D reconstructed reef that you can see here at the top, and the corresponding semantic segmentation map that is what you see at the bottom, which is a kind of an integration of the results on different frames pointing to the same 3D point. And I've been showing you a number of things that you can do with this digital data for animal conservation, but actually the cool thing is to put everything together. So when you have the animals detected, when you have the tracking, when you have the environment reconstructed in 3D, then you have a full digital twin of the different of the natural reserves you're observing. And this is, for example, a work that came out really recently by Ben Koger, Blair Costello, Ian Kuzing, and colleagues, so the people from Constance. And it's a fantastic work when they basically put all these things together, and then they were able to answer some ecological questions about the behavior of the mammals, how they move, how they migrate, and all this was basically powered by drone data, by 3D models, and these type of things. So I think that when you have all the different ingredients, and every ingredient depends on a different AI technique, then you're really able to put together and answer some super exciting ecological questions. Good. So I'll let you give me 10 seconds for breathing, and Arthur, if there are some questions, I'm happy to take them before the concluding remarks.
Yeah, actually, we do have a lot of questions, so I will ask you just a few one or two about this section.
Perfect.
The first one, is have you tried transformer-based vision models to detect animals? And this one comes with a comment, which is theoretically it has less inductive biases.
So I haven't been very busy in the transformers sphere so far. We are now working on some transformer-based image text alignment problems. I'm going to show that in a second. It's true that most of the research we have been doing so far is like ConvNets based. So I think it's if the primary remains of classification is definitely a good possibility for segmentation of very high resolution images. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe thanks to the segformer or some of these new architectures, it's definitely worth checking. I've just never did it.
Yeah. We do have another question. Can you better explain what AID does?
Well, okay. Let me go back. So it will take a second. AID is basically a software suite, which is a kind of a graphic user interface for people who want to run deep learning models, but they don't want to code anything, basically. So a user can basically upload a data collection campaign they have. So that will basically upload a bunch of images, and then you will be invited to choose among one of the different models that are pre-available in AID. It can be models for species classification, like in this case. It can be counting models, it can be semantic segmentation. So we have 1 or 2 models per each type, or object detection. Sorry, I had to tell them all. So, and when the model is selected, basically the user press play if there are no annotations, then the pre-trained model will make some prediction. And this prediction will go back to the users. So you can see here the blue squares. And the user will be asked like to confirm them. So if you click on a prediction, it gets green. If you unclick it, it disappears. And like that, the model keeps fine-tuning thanks to the interaction with the user. And so by having these active learning loops, and you can basically decide how many frames you want to annotate, how many do you want to correct, and so on and so forth, you basically help the model to get better. Then we also have a marketplace where you can share the models among users. So if you, I don't know, if you're interested by species detection and you are in a similar environment, you can basically import models from someone else who has agreed to share their models. And, you know, we try to build something that's useful for many.
Thank you for the details. We have also I can continue with another question maybe before you go ahead.
All right.
Can you expand on the crowdsourcing used for initial classification of images? I think you kind of answered about that. It might also be related to Sarah Berry work.
Yeah, so I mean, it all started when this first time we went to Namibia. We went with the drone and we came back with a really, I mean, there was a suitcase full of data, and we realized that we were lacking the annotation to get started. So to train, I mean, we can always try to shoot ImageNet pre-trained models, but I mean, if you want to tune them on your data, at some point you will have to get some annotation done. So the thing that we did that first time was to create a type of a game app together with our colleagues in Qatar of CCAI. And we had this game app when we were asking people to basically, you know, click on a tablet whenever they were seeing an animal. And we gathered a lot of people who wanted to play because they cared about conservation. And we very quickly realized that we could not just shoot random pictures, but we will have to use some like smart way of sorting through the pictures and showing the picture where the animal presence was more likely and things like that. So that's when we started to work into active learning strategies where we will basically like keep people entertained in a way by showing them images where presence of animals was really likely. And the model will benefit for all those clicks because, I mean, more clicks, more labels, and then better training for models.
Thank you very much. I think you can go ahead and we will ask the other question at the end of your
talk. All right. I just have 3-4 slides before we finish, so I won't be long. But I think that, you know, so far we've talked about data, we've talked about models, but, you know, there are a couple more things that I think are worth discussing. And so first I wanted to discuss about what we can do better. Because we have been gathering so many data. For example, I don't know, maybe you're familiar with iNaturalist. iNaturalist is a fantastic crowdsourced data set of images that people have been taking with mobile phones. So, you see a species, you take a picture, you upload it on iNat, and you know there will be a model classifying it and tell you what species it is. And this is like incredible, especially because, I mean, as of now, we have about 40 million observations, so there is a lot. But if you look at the geographic distribution of these images, I mean, you see some patterns, no? Of course, most people are in Europe, Northern America, and even though it's great to have data there's also a lot of other regions and also a lot of very biodiverse regions that are not really covered. And if you remember the map that we saw at the beginning, remember that in this area here, we have a lot of risk of loss of biodiversity, and the Amazon is super biodiverse as well, but we have very little data from there. So these biases are there, and they are at all levels. They are related to where people live, they are related to how accessible places are, or also with respect to socioeconomic history. So in some neighborhoods, maybe people go out more, and I don't know. So these biases are there, and they eventually end up in all our models. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. And this gets probably even more heavy if you start using large language models. You know, you're many of you are for sure working with Clip or ChatGPT to create labels by prompting text. What do I know? And this is something we were exploring in our recent work. We presented at CVPR a few weeks ago at the CV for Animals workshop. And we can see that this language model are very like English centric. They are very dependent on which areas do we have the data sets from, because CLIP has been basically learned on all of the internet. But so there are some regions that are less represented, and in those regions, this model will work less well. So all these biases, we need to keep that in mind. Another thing that we should maybe do better would be to really cooperate with park rangers and ecologists on what we do with our data and how much we open them. Because we need open data, we need it for our research and to develop all these fantastic algorithms, but we need the data. But also, if I was a poacher, I will just join a crowdsourcing campaign or become an engineer in that, and then I will have all the information I need. So there is probably also something that we need to be aware that this data have value, and this data is about living organisms that are under threat. So we need to be a little bit careful on what we do with our data. We're not just playing with ImageNet in this case. More on the model side, definitely we need to put more attention on predicting with uncertainties and really be much more transparent about model uncertainties. I know it doesn't make your paper shine if you show huge uncertainties, but this is actually the reality of things. And if we want these routines to be effective in the field and still bring you to CVPR in your favorite conference, but still be useful by the people who use it at the end of the line, these uncertainties need to be there and need to be clearly reported. And actually, AI has a cost, and I guess you have already had some lectures about this, but AI models cost, of course, in terms of dollars to run instances of GPT-4 costs a lot of money, and they use a lot of energy. So, training those models for any possible parameterization, we need to keep in mind the CO2 emissions that these models entail. And so we need to be careful about sizing these models right, and making sure that a model that I create can be used by other people so that not everybody start creating their own. But okay, there are some word of caution, but it's also very exciting times. There is so much that is going on in the space of AI for conservation. We have a Slack channel that it's super active, and with Sarah Beery and some of us started it a couple of years ago. We were thinking to be 100. Now we are like 1,500 and still growing. So if you want to connect and be there and having discussions about AI for conservation, just send me an email or write to Sarah, and we'll let you in. It will be a great pleasure. And then there is a lot of initiatives like the Wild Drone one, which is a project that is just starting, where we are having networks of PhD students working on, in this case, drones for conservation issues. So these community building efforts are happening more and more, and I sincerely invite you to jump on the train and to come and help us making the world a better place. On the model side, it's also very exciting because now we have systems that can detect, we have systems that can reconstruct the environment, but we still are to make this step towards all the knowledge that is sitting in ecology, that is there to be involved in the methods. And I think that hybrid models will pop up more and more in the future. And I think there is a lot into integrating AI with ecological knowledge that will be more appearing in the literature, and the models of tomorrow will be very, very exciting, or at least I hope. Anyway, I think we get to the end of this talk. Thank you very much for staying with me for this almost 1 hour. And I hope it was fun. I hope it was interesting, and it made you excited and willing to jump on the train of AI for conservation. We'll be very, very happy and lucky to have you. So, just drop me a line or anyone in this space, and we will welcome you with open arms. Thank you very much for your attention. And Arthur, I'm here for the questions.
Thank you very much, Devis, for this really interesting talk. I mean, there are a lot of ideas and really interesting perspective of research. So we do have a lot of questions. The first one is the following. So what are the open source, very high resolution satellite data for wildlife and or animal monitoring?
That's a good question. So on the drone space, there is this link I showed before when I was talking about drone data. It's a collection of drone data sets that are open and accessible. I might want to go back. Let's see if I can go back. I can just put the link again so you can see it. So it's here. So it's Sam Morris who compiled everything he could find from the drone data for animal conservation. This is there, and you can use it for training your model. On the satellite side, I'm not aware of open data at the resolution necessary to detect single individuals, mostly because these data are very often company owned, and if researchers buy them, they're not allowed to share them. And but I don't know, maybe now recently something has been appearing. Maybe check this very recent paper in Nature about counting ungulates from satellites. There is maybe a data set going on with that paper. It's possible.
Thank you very much. We have another question related to data set. Are there data sets combining multiple modalities, such as simultaneous GPS collar, camera traps, and UAV data?
I'm wondering if Ben Koger and colleagues made available their data set. It's true that for the time being, most data sets I am aware of are quite unimodal. Also because people are based on campaigns that are really located in one place. I have a project running now. We're acquiring this type of data, but we are still in the data acquisition phase, so it will come in time. Definitely have a look in Lila, what is available. So I'll just go back to Lila here. So if something exists, it's in there. It's in here because the people hosting Lila are really trying to put there everything that is conservation related in a single place. So if something exists, it's in there.
Okay, thank you. We indeed have a lot of questions about data because people want to go into this research with that, and that's a really important question, of course. The next question is more generalistic. What kind of reports can you show, policymakers based on the results of the analysis of all the application you've mentioned?
So in my little experience, which is mostly working with the African parks, the reports we can make with them about the population of the animals in their parks help them better allocate resources for conservation. So this is like at a very small scale. It's really helping people on the ground to take in the right decision for a very specific animal population. And then I've been showing the works on with the mega detector. I just put it back. So here you can see two examples of reports created by the mega detector were then used by Department of Fish and Game in Idaho or anti-poaching consortia to basically scale up their monitoring to be able to basically be there on time, let's say. Finally, there are the works of Tanya Berger-Wolf, which thanks to the detection that they had together with the WildMe consortium, they were able to add animals on the list of endangered species. And when a species gets to the list, it also gets much more exposure and attention for conservation. And the fact that those species went out from the data deficient category into the endangered category, in a way, made their protection more easy. So I think that it's all these little steps. Unfortunately, very rarely we speak directly with politicians and high-level decision makers, but I mean, who knows? Maybe one day.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next question, the following, remote sensing, drones, camera traps seem to be for mammals. Is there a technology for insects or reptiles, or do these are not monitored that much?
Okay, this presentation has biases, and of course the bias is the research I've been doing. There is quite a lot actually. You can see here, for example, pose estimation results for insects here at the top. If you look at the, let's see if I can get it here, this work by Lars Halk and Benjamin Risse from Münster, they are basically tracking ants. You see here, ant position. So this whole place you're looking at is basically 10 meters wide. So they are tracking ants with a mobile phone, and the camera is just moving and trying to follow the ant. So this is again an insect-based study. And I've seen recently a paper about counting bats. So there is a gigantic colony of bats living in a cave in Malaysia, if I remember well. And when they all get out at once, and it's very, very difficult to know how many they are. So they basically installed video cameras and counted them with like deep learning algorithms making automatic counting. So I think it spans more than mammals. It's just that I'm extremely biased to what I do.
Thank you very much. I will just ask a last question. Of course, we have a lot of them. Is remote sensing any useful in dense forests like Amazon?
It depends what you're looking at, I would say. So there was all this like very like inspiring research by Greg Asner and colleagues maybe 10 years ago, where they were characterizing trees in the Amazon. So they were like flying planes with hyperspectral cameras, and to characterize species of trees, this was fantastic. It was like hyperspectral cameras, LiDARs, and with the two together, multimodal then, they were characterizing the biodiversity of plants. Now, yeah, if it's something where you need to have direct access, or if you want to look at species that are below the canopy, I mean, if you cannot see it, it's going to be complicated to use remote sensing for it. So, you know, it's like with coral reefs. We ended up going in the water because the level of detail we needed, we could not do it from outside of the water itself.
Thank you very much for all the answers and for this exciting talk. I think we will stop here since we're on time right now. We still have a lot of questions which are on our community platform. We will try to go through them to answer them. So thank you very much to all the people attending this talk, and see you for the next day.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's a pleasure.